Thanks, Susan. So for you teachers out there, we're going to do a little bit of a history lesson, and it might not be about sheds. It's going to be about something else, and the present and the future. So a bit of a crystal ball moment. So let's go into the next slide and see what this is all about. So is the men's shed the holy grail of community healing and socialization? Well, let's see why we need them and where we're going. So we've seen in the men's sheds themselves that men are, let's say, victims or casualties really of our past. And this is for sayings that boys have been said to them by adults, their parents, teachers, etc. Boys don't cry, grow a pair, man up, you're a sissy, stop being like a girl. All these emasculating statements, which I certainly heard as a boy growing up, and I'm sure you might have said them or might have had them said to you inadvertently, because we learn from those who we've grown up with. What we see in the men's shed movement is that these older men are somewhat traumatized by their ability to emotionalize stuff. So at a very young age as men and boys, we close down our emotions. Thankfully, that is changing, but we've probably got another 2 or 3 generations where we have this going on in men. And so to speak about our emotions, to speak about our feelings is very, very difficult to overcome. And I'm very happy to say that when men feel safe, we start talking and we feel safe enough to talk. And often that is to other men and it's not to women. So the men's shed has become a haven and a place where men go and talk about their problems, which is very unheard of in our Western society. And I'm thrilled to say that it is going on in their droves now, behind these closed doors, so to speak. Men are talking about things that they would never talk about, particularly with their health as well, prostate cancers, things like that, erectile dysfunctions, things like that. You're not going to speak in front of other people, and you really need to feel comfortable to talk about these concerns and health issues. And I can tell you, folks, that is happening in our Scottish men's sheds. And also then let's look at production. We come from the post-Victorian Industrial Revolution. If we look in Scotland with the clearances, and we look at what happened to the Industrial Revolution, people left their village life and they went into far away from home, and they went into factories working often in horrendous conditions, let alone the Victorian workhouses. And so we judge ourselves today by production, the list, the famous list. How well have I done today? How many things have I ticked off the list? And this brings a lot of stress into our world. What we can also see with the Scottish Government, and we as a Health Men's charity have embodied this. We've gone on to a 4-day week now. We take off a Wednesday, and we've called it Wellbeing Wednesdays. So we work 2, off 1, work 2. We looked at the Swedish model and the Norwegian model, where you get a higher productivity rate out of your staff as well. And that is paying dividends for us in the Scottish Men's Shed Association. And the Scottish Government's looking at that in the normal work week as well. So 4 days a week, 3 days off, but it must be the Wednesday that you take off, not a long Friday weekend, to give you the optimum break. And one of the mantras in the Men's Shed is we don't do deadlines and we don't do stress in our creating. So if you want something done in the Men's Shed, really think about that. Oh, I need it by Friday. You might not get it by Friday, because the men are there to enjoy themselves, and they're doing it in a loving, caring way of recycling, upcycling, making you something. The last thing we want is to put stress into their lives. So it's not a production line, and it's not a service provider. These are individual voluntary guys helping themselves, first of all, and because they're healthy, they can help you. So please do keep that in mind. And then we look at the differences also between our genders. Oh, this is a hot topic for many people, but it's a topic we really need to embrace. If we look at the Australian government, they've identified with their men's sheds, and it's possibly come out of this, that they have 2 different health policies, one for women and girls and one for men and boys, because they've identified that men and women absolutely have different health requirements. And I've spoken to the ministers about this. We've had some polling on this in various seminars, and we've been getting a big thumbs up from a lot of the professionals So hopefully in Scotland that'll happen. And also we communicate very differently as well. Women can talk face to face often very happily. For men with our testosterone that drives our bodies, that can be very aggressive. So we in the shed will say we communicate shoulder to shoulder. And what that means is when men are shoulder to shoulder and they're focusing on something in front of them to work on something, they start talking. Then our bodies get tired, the testosterone drops off. They go to the social area for a cup of tea and coffee because, of course, there's no alcohol in men's sheds. And while they're resting, let's say, their body language turns to face. They're looking at each other's eyes. Trust is formed, friendships formed. Testosterone levels pick up after about 20 minutes, half an hour for most men. Let's go back to that project. And so the sheds is this yo-yo effect of stop, start, which really fits well for our testosterone-fueled bodies as men. And it's no surprise then to me that the sheds feel just so perfect for men to relax in and have that inclusion and acceptance. And of course, get self-directed learning, which we're going to drop into soon. Next slide. So I'm not going to go too deeply into this because Danny's going to be talking about this later on. But I do want to bring in that last sentence there, a place and connection for life-wide and lifelong learning. So a lot of you might know lifelong learning. In fact, all of you would know about lifelong learning. But have you learned about life-wide learning? So let's have a look at that sense of purpose, life-wide learning. Let's have a look at the next slide and see what that's got to say. So the need, CLD, you know that if without the need, we can't do anything. And here you can see the need, one from an older man. He's actually our treasurer as well, John Searle from the Wee County Men's Shed. And then we have a younger man, Stuart Patton from Garnock Valley Men's Shed, who's an ex-veteran. And you can see that there's a complete age difference. You can see both these men have got time on their hands. And you can see that both these men have absolutely changed their lives by going to the sheds. Let's have a look at the next slide. So we're getting to this life wideness, and I encourage you to look at Norman Jackson's website. And we're going to focus on here about intermingling. Now, how do you intermingle? How do you actually connect with people if you're sitting at home alone or sitting at home and don't want to go to any other place? And the shed becomes this place where intermingling can happen and life-wide learning can happen. So, you know, we go to a creche as a baby, you're learning socialization skills, you're learning how to interact with other people. And we can tell from COVID now how isolated we've all become. And it's the biggest killer, more so than smoking. The one statistic came out with the NHS that loneliness and isolation is a bigger killer than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And we can all now, if anything good that's come out of this pandemic is that everybody can identify what loneliness and isolation is like. And men particularly are hardwired to do it. Don't ask me why, but we are. So we actually need some real help to help us connect. And the Men's Shed movement is doing that. But do look at Norman Jackson's stuff. Very interesting, life-wide learning. So what happens if you aren't connected in the world? You've lost your job. What do? Was your social place your workplace? Did you ever fit in at school? Do you judge yourself as a non-achiever? What are your standards as achievement? How do you feel about yourself? Whatever the reason is, you actually have time on your hands, no purpose, or can't see a way out. And what happens if you happen to be a man like this in Scotland? Well, let's have a look at the next slide. Originally, for hundreds of years, what we were given was the pubs, great social meeting place. But alcohol, men are definitely into the riskier business and then women for sure. And betting shops. They will welcome all men. What else did we have? Unless you were specific with a sport or a hobby or bowls or something like that, there's not really any place for us across the whole Western world for men just to socialize outside of religion or politics or something like that. But now, thankfully, we have the Men's Shed movement. And some statistics of why it's important for you, and this is very sobering that I'm gonna fire off at you now, that men are 3 times more likely to become dependent on alcohol than women. They're twice as likely to become drug dependent. They're 7 times more likely to become addicted to gambling, 3 times more likely to take their lives. Suicide is the biggest single cause of death of men under the age of 46, with 12 men suiciding every day in the UK. These are horrendous statistics that's happening to our men and our sons and our fathers out there, particularly that 33 to 46-year-old age group, particularly with COVID and coming out of the pandemic and so many businesses losing their businesses and losing their jobs. Men's sheds are never going to be needed more than ever now. So we need your help with this to help these guys and help their families, of course. Okay, next slide, please. So let's listen right now to the men themselves of what's actually changed their lives. Rather than me telling you, let's listen to the men.
Robert John Owen.
And how old are you?
90 in July.
So how has your life changed from a year ago to coming now?
Oh, it's given me a second life, because now I've got into doing things. I'm a much happier person. I was a bit miserable because I lost my wife last year, and I went through a very deep mourning session. Sorry. And I've been married 67 years, so you can imagine that, you know, that the loss of a wife like that was deeply affected. Yeah. I was deeply affected, and although you get a lot of sympathy, it's not enough. And I went through a very sad time, and suddenly one day I thought, come to the men's shed, see what it's like again. And once I was here, you know, I met Angus. Angus had lost his voice because he had a heart attack, and he was trying to speak properly again. So I used to sit with Angus every time, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We sat together and he talked and talked until he obviously was getting better. Then one day I saw on the notice board there, table and 2 chairs. And I thought, oh, that seems a good idea. So I put my name in.
So when you wake up in the morning now, compared to 6 months ago?
Oh, I'm a happier bloke. Much happier bloke. Yeah. Okay.
And I
look forward to coming here. I really do. I really do. Invaluable. All the talk, and we have a bit of back chat, you know, especially Mike and me, we rib each other terrible. But it's nice. And the fact that we're all equal, because it doesn't matter how old or young you are, or where you've been and what you've done, we're all equal. And it's our shed.
I'm Jeremy, and I am a sociology PhD student at the University of Aberdeen. I'm 25 and most of the guys here are at least over 50s. What I found anyway, a lot of the guys in there, they're all sort of hidden teachers. I'm a bookish person, and I'm not great with tools or what have you. I found a lot of the chaps here come in, and they're only too happy to offer advice and suggestions to me. Say, hey, you should do this. Hey, I'll show you how to do that. And you know, it's like intergenerational transfer of knowledge.
I was born in Stornoway, but I came to Keith when I was 5. I've worked mostly out of the town in my working career. So now that I've retired, although everyone in the town seemed to know me, I wasn't quite sure who they were. Retirement hung heavy in my hands until I heard about the men's shed, and I went along, and I met and got to know people that I've seen going about all my life. The camaraderie, if that's the word you take it, is excellent. The meetings are friendly, lots of chat, and they've improved retired life immensely.
John Wilson, 84.
84. Does that make you the oldest man in the shed?
Yes,
It does. How long have you been coming, John?
about a year.
So what do you do in the shed? Why do you come here?
Make bird boxes just for companionship. I'm just on my own, and it's just for relaxation, and I'm getting old and I'm trying to keep as agile as much as I can, so that's why I come to the shed, and it's a good class of boys and that, and thoroughly enjoy working with them, and it's actually helped one another.
So do you find that, as you said, we don't have a shed, but the journey to the shed and doing these kind of coffee mornings gives the men then a purpose or a role?
Oh yes, definitely.
And have you found that, I was filming some guys with strokes and stuff in here, and they were saying that coming out and socialising and speaking more rather than maybe being at home alone, and it's helped in their lives.
Yeah.
Have you witnessed any of that?
Well, personally speaking, you see, I didn't have a stroke, but I did have neurosurgery, and that's why my face and my voice and my balance and my coordination aren't quite right. And although I was a teacher, teaching a class of youngsters is totally different to addressing adults. So on the occasions when Ian's not here, the chairman, I've got to chair the meetings, and I had never chaired meetings before. So it was a very rapid learning curve, if that's the right phrase, because I just wasn't used to that. Because teaching kids, folk think, oh, he's a teacher, he can do that. But chairing a meeting so that everybody gets a chance to speak, and you don't get folk that dominate it, and you get proper discussion. I'm not saying I'm a brilliant chairman, but there's definitely a skill and a technique. So you have to watch other folk and see how they do it, and you just have to put in your own personal input. So it's helped my confidence.
Fantastic. So we can see there from those men themselves, so diverse, different ages, how it's impacted them. Even a teacher who has worked for many, many years in front of young people has found it challenging to work with a group of men, but is loving it and is voluntarily becoming the vice chair of their shed and engaging him as well. And if we look at this last slide in this section, again, it's about looking at what is it identifying, and Danny's going to get into this: boredom, inactivity, loneliness problems, smoking, alcohol, cancer, all these risky behaviors that we see associated often with men more than women. And again, that new place, the magnet, is what the shed is. If you don't have the place, that life-wide learning, that intermingling cannot happen because the men are staying self-isolated. So important with the Community Empowerment Bill in Scotland, and very unique, that bill passed, is very upfront for men's sheds to be able to have a shed or a place that they can go to. And we're going to talk on later, I think Julie will talk on later about the Community Empowerment Bill as well in Scotland. I'll see you on the other side.